give a warm welcome to Professor Ingrid Robeyns. Ingrid, welcome. Yeah, the situation is different on Dutch universities. Major part of the funding is public. I just looked into it, 10 to 15% of professorial chairs is externally funded by companies, NGOs, or sectoral organizations. Does that mean that the problem addressed by Claudine Gay doesn't count for us? Or is there like a similar trend?
So I think if you move the problem or the analysis to a high enough level of abstraction, and you use words like danger of a power grab, yes, and if you talk about notions such as power and ideology, then we can see similar trends or worries in the Netherlands. But it's true that our funding system is completely different.
Yeah, can you give us an example of where you see parts of, or just glimpses of a power grab?
Well, I mean, we have a government that is consisting in large part of extreme right parties. And just to remind you that when he's now not in the coalition, but when Thierry Baudet had a big, he's one of the many leaders of extreme right parties. When he was actually winning a big election for the Provinciale Staten, he gave a speech, you know, the Uil of Minerva speech, where he deliberately said he was going to replace and attack the people in, and then he started with the architects, but he then also mentioned the universities. So this is not hypothetical, because I think, I'm not a political scientist, but between the different right-wing, extreme right-wing parties, it's the same pool of voters. So, and I see, I mean, if you look at, you gave the example of the Butterfly Foundation, the Vlinderstichting, where there was a death threat because of research being done. So I really do think we are in a difficult situation. It's easy to say, oh, these are American circumstances, but the thing is, and that's actually precisely what Claudine said, there is like decades of preparation, and we are moving in a direction that I found extremely worrisome.
And do you see that among scholars, that your colleagues, that they feel restricted or targeted or less open?
That's not very difficult, because this government cut our budget. They initially wanted to cut it with 10%, 1 billion. Because of really incredibly intense protests, we've been able to reduce this to a lower number, but still the effects are that we have departments being closed, people being sacked. In my faculty, the Faculty of Humanities in Utrecht, there will be programs that get closed. They will try to keep the knowledge, keep the expertise, but very concretely, this year we all teach 10% more. And you have to, what I found important is, we basically have two sources of knowledge in academia, time and money. And with money you can buy time, and if you have less time, that means you have less academic freedom. Because in order to do certain things, you need to have time. I mean, if only to organize protests, you need time. There are colleagues who have set up an expert committee to study the relationship of the universities with Gaza, because they felt this was needed, that they would do this independently without being appointed by our administrators. You need time. For all these things, we need time. And that means if there's pressure, either because we do much more teaching, or because we have to constantly be in competition to acquire the research funding, then it's clear that academic freedom will suffer.
Yeah, Claudine Gay just pointed out how big money comes with, buys big influence, has become a ticket for a say in independent scientific research. You in your work, you focus on libertarianism. Could you briefly explain what that concept means?
Yes, so libertarianism is a view in basically political philosophy or whatever, so basically the view is that there should be a limit to the concentration of extreme wealth accumulation. So there are different ways to describe it, but you could say, for example, just like you don't want anybody to be poor, which is a goal we all subscribe to in all countries, you also do not want people to be extremely rich. And that actually goes against some of the assumptions of what I see as the hegemonic ideology, which is, as long as we have an equal playing field, just make use of it, and the sky is the limit. And in the scholarly research that I've done, and then later also in a book for citizens that I wrote, I've laid out that I believe this view is mistaken because wealth concentration comes with all sorts of harms. And one of the reasons is actually in the talk that we just heard, which is that money in high concentration means power.
So money buys power.
Money embodies power, and money, yeah, you can use it to translate into power. And I mean, for politics, it's obvious how there are all sorts of mechanisms in which you can channel money into power. And of course, different countries have different systems. So if you have strong enough walls between the sphere of money and the sphere of politics, you can try to do something to protect your democracy. But even in democracies such as the Netherlands, we see that there are examples of how the lobby of very rich people then influences the democratic decisions made.
And in what way does this threaten our democracy?
In principle, democracy should be that we all have an equal opportunity to have an equal say on collective decision making. And if you hire lobbyists to basically get a law passed because that suits your interest well, then you are using a mechanism which is different than one person, one vote. There was a fantastic, I think, piece of research journalism by NRC, I think now 2 years ago, or 1.5 years ago, on how the lobby of large well, actually multinationals, but that still had the structure of family companies, how they were able to get the same deductions from paying inheritance tax. I mean, this is a complicated fiscal story, but basically they were able to pay less taxes. And if you look at the research on paying taxes, actually we have in the Netherlands a regressive tax system. This is a well-kept secret. Because we think we're egalitarian, so we think that actually those who are stronger, who are richer, pay more, also percent-wise, and that's not true. You can just read Gabriel Zuckman's research on this. And so the reasons this happens is because there's all sorts of loopholes, there are practices that allow the richest to ultimately pay fewer taxes. Yeah.
So you would favor like banning out all lobbyism? But if you talk to parliamentarians, they'll say, well, lobbying really helps us because if lobbyists come, I get a sort of insight and expertise knowledge of a domain I otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah, so then you have to, so I haven't worked out the solution to this particular problem. There must be academics who actually have good thoughts on this. But so you would want to have still that sort of information without the disproportionate power influence. But I do think that, I mean, the relevance of the research I've done on extreme wealth for the topic of the debate today is that I'm very skeptical that we should try to solve the financial crisis that we have in the Netherlands, in the universities, by going to private donors. The chapter in my book on philanthropy is called "Philanthropy is not a solution," and I think this also applies to universities.
Okay, then this impossible last question. How would you solve the problem of a lack of funding?
Well, I mean, actually, I do have, I don't know whether I'm now transgressing some boundaries, but I do have a solution, which is...
Share.
Yes, which is that we all elect a government that consists of reasonable parties that understand, yeah. Because I just want to say one thing about what should this government then understand, and really here I am totally I mean, I totally agree with what Claudine was saying, but there's a fantastic paper that I want all of you to just read if you go home and if you have access to the library, which was published in January 1951 by the then president of the University of Chicago, called Robert Maynard Hutchins, in the journal Ethics. And it's called The Freedom of the University. Every time I think this is, I don't know this person, I don't know, he may have been an unpleasant person, I really don't know. But he said, let me just read you 2 sentences. A university is a center of independent thought, and the faculty is a group set apart to think independently and to help other people to do so. Such centers of independent thought are indispensable to the progress and even to the security of any society. Perhaps the short lives that dictatorships have enjoyed in the past are attributable as much to this as to any other single thing. Dictatorships and independent thought cannot exist together. Yet no society can flourish without independent thought. And we need parties that understand this, and we need society to understand this. And right now, our government consists of politicians who do not show that they understand this. In fact, they do everything to show the opposite. They have this utilitarian framework.
Okay, yeah, this is hopeful, and it is not hopeful at all, because we will have to convince a few million people to vote on the 29th of October, because we're so lucky that we can go to the ballot box again to vote for free and independent university. Thank you, Ingrid Robeyns.